sense, yes.
Okay, then I'm going to give you an illustration. Nuremberg trials, 1945 to 1949. 24 Nazi war criminals are defended by Nazi lawyers. The Nazi lawyers inform the judges at the Nuremberg trial, you have no right to condemn these Nazi war criminals because they simply were carrying out orders. They simply were doing what their culture taught them to do. The trials communicate truth, according to the Vedas and Upanishads. You can communicate truth through myth. Jesus communicates truth through parable. Parables are not historical records of anything. They're stories. And Jesus communicates truth through stories. And that's what the Vedas and Upanishads are.
And
they're stories. It's not a historical claim. It's a story, it's a myth, but truth is being communicated, is the claim. Am I right or wrong?
No, you're basically saying that what I believe to be God is a myth.
No. What I'm saying is the avatars
Okay, I'm sorry.
are
but
communicated
who exactly are
in
these
mythological
avatars you refer to?
narrative. The avatars are not space-time people.
Who exactly are these avatars you're referring to, may I ask?
Arjuna.
Like Shiva, Brahma,
Yeah.
and you're saying those are, by the way, who I believe to be God, which you
Yes.
claim are mythological characters.
No. They're appearing on Earth. Them being seen is not an historical event. It's not the claim that these guys really walked the planet. It's more that they are spirits that exist, and they're the truth. And that's fine, I got no problem with that. But let's be honest, it's not a claim of historicity. It's a claim that these spirits are true. Guess what? I've never seen God. But I believe God is true. But I would never say to you, God the Father walked on earth. No, God the Father walking on earth never occurred. It's not an historical event. Jesus Christ, God in human form, walked on earth. Right? Okay, so the avatars of Hinduism are not historical people who are born in a town, live, and then we have the historical record of them. They're mythological figures, but the point is, truth is being communicated through myth.
Right, but you then seem to be saying that truth is both true in the Upanishads and the Bible, which actually they're somewhat contradictory in some ways at least.
Oh, brilliant, absolutely. So now, we have a truth claim in the Vedas and Upanishads.
Right.
We have a truth claim in the Gospels. And obviously those two truth claims contradict each other.
Well, actually they're mostly similar, but in key details they do differ, yes?
Oh, come on.
Well, all religions in the world promote good life. I mean, if I follow
Yes.
any religion in the world, the society would be fine. We just suck because we don't.
All right. But obviously, Jesus is saying there are not many gods. Jesus stuck to the monotheism of Judaism. There's one God. He repeated the Shema of Israel. Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God is one. Now, obviously, that's not what Hinduism teaches.
Right. So how do you, decide which one is more true?
Well, that's what you got to do. You got to study the Vedas and Upanishads, and you got to ask, okay, is there evidence that supports the truth claims? And then you got to read the Gospels and ask yourself, is there evidence to support the truth claims of Christ?
And what is the evidence that supports the truth claims of Christ?
His sinless life, his incredible ethical teachings, his death on a cross, loving and forgiving his enemies, and his resurrection from the dead. Those 4 points.
All right, but then that is equivalent to saying over the history of time, people who lived the way the Upanishads teach would cause just as good, good being and good life. How is it that, and secondly, why do you say that he was completely sinless? What exactly is sin? Why are you saying, you claiming that he is sinless is like saying that I have my own idea of sin and he's adhering to it, therefore it's your own idea and not actually Jesus's.
Fascinating point. No, sin is not something that I make up. Sin, justice, goodness flow from the character of God. And according to both the Torah and the New Testament, the goodness of God is revealed in the commandments: do not murder, love, do not lie, speak the truth, do not covet, celebrate with another person all the talents they have, do not be jealous or envious, build other people up. So sin is saying, God, your definition is wrong, my definition is right.
Isn't that circular argument though? Like saying, I know that Jesus was sinless because God said so, and what God says is sinless, therefore there's no basis for what is and is not sinless except for your own decision.
No, the reason I answered you was because you said, Cliff, you're just making it up. No. I'm not making it up. You read the Old Testament, the Ten Commandments, the Decalogue in Exodus 20.
Right, can I interrupt you for a second? You're saying you knew what sin is and sin is not based on Jesus' word, but you claim that Jesus lived a sinless life before you even had, and I mean, while he's living his life, you had no real idea of what sin is or is not. So how do you know that he lived a sinless life before he even told you? And if it's after he told you, then he can just suit it to whatever he did, and therefore he would be sinless.
Jesus was a Jew.
Right.
And as a Jew, he believed that the Ten Commandments were from God, from his Father. And he lived up to those Ten Commandments perfectly.
All right.
That was his definition of sinless.
All right, and if I, for example, believed in something else, say, I don't know, like 5 commandments that I come up with out of top, or some other person comes up with, and I strongly believe that that is the truth, and I perfectly adhere to it to my entire life, I can claim that I have been sinless, and so can other people who, use that same argument. Just because he was Jew and he followed through what he believed does not make him sinless any more than me following through what I believe would make me sinless.
Right. But Jesus, as a Jew, insisted the Ten Commandments are the law of God.
Right,
and then he lived up to that incredibly high ethical standard.
And if I insist, so what you're saying is if I insist on some incredibly high ethical standard, which again is, we don't even know what that high standard is, or if it even is ethical, and then I just, obey these laws that someone made, then you're claiming that I'm equally sinless as Jesus.
I can promise you that if you espouse a very high ethical standard and then live up to that high ethical standard perfectly, I will respect you highly. That's why I respect Gandhi as much as I do. Because Gandhi lived up to a very high ethical standard very, very well, didn't he?
But then...
That's why I respect Gandhi. If Gandhi would have gone around with a racist attitude, if Gandhi would have gone around knocking people's legs out from underneath them, cut them off at the knees, I would not respect Gandhi as much as I do.
We're coming back to, again, the argument of what is a high ethical standard, because we don't know what sin is or is not without these high standards that we aspire to, and we're making up these standards, or somebody
Okay, good.
is.
My argument is that you understand by exercising your conscience in a rational, responsible way. You have a very good understanding of what is right and wrong. And that is why if I go up to this guy and smack him in the face, you're going to say, whoa, what are you doing? And if I go up to this guy and steal his backpack, you're going to say, whoa, what are you doing? And if I exhibit a racist attitude towards you, you're going to say, whoa, time out, what are you doing? See, you have a conscience that ties you into those 10 commandments, that ties you into the teachings of Christ, the same way I do, the same way everybody does here. I don't think you need to have a PhD in the Bible to know that the rape of a woman is absolutely wrong. I think you've got a conscience that will inform you very quickly that rape is wrong.
All right, so you're saying that, for example, you stealing the backpack would be counted as wrong, right?
I think you would believe that.
Right,
Am I wrong?
but not necessarily.
Good.
I mean, property, again, is a concept that is inherently selfish, for example.
Okay, we disagree.
And I'm just not necessarily my point here, but say communism, for example.
No, you speak for yourself, though. Come on now.
Oh,
I don't want to debate with Karl Marx. He's dead. I want to debate or talk with you. Okay?
So is Jesus. We're still discussing
No,
him.
Jesus is alive. He rose from the dead. That's different from Karl
All right,
Marx.
then where is he now? I don't see him alive.
Where is he now? He's in heaven.
All right, so
He's going to come back a second time.
And jeez. All right. So
Where are the avatars?
You know what? Okay. That point is obviously not going to get anywhere, and I'm going to get irritated by it.
Well,
But
if you want to shut down and get irritated, that's your decision.
all right, fine. What are we arguing again? Because you seem to be.
I think we're done.
going
If you
on.
don't know where we're talking about, I think we're done.
No, I don't think we're done yet.
Oh, okay. Well, then give it to me. What are you thinking?
All right. So your issue of theft here, you're assuming that that's wrong, right?
Yes.
But that's in the case of our society. For example, if communism worked out well and the proletarian dictatorship actually, passed through and moved on to the rest of the stages of Karl Marx's supposed philosophy, would property and things like that would not exist, and there would be no such thing as you taking it from him. You're just utilizing it for whatever you need. It's not necessarily theft.
No offense to Adam Smith, no offense to Karl Marx. My view of stealing his backpack as being wrong has nothing to do with communism, has nothing to do with capitalism. No offense to the U.S. Supreme Court. It has nothing to do with the dictates of the U.S. Supreme Court. The reason that I'm convinced that stealing his backpack is wrong is not because him having a backpack is selfish. Rather, he's a human being created in the image of God, which means he has dignity. Because he has dignity, I need to respect him. And one of the ways to respect him is to respect the property that belongs to him.
What I'm questioning
Therefore,
is
stealing his backpack is wrong.
You seem to be believing that property is an inherent right to people, that people have a right to property, then that property is something that belongs to me. Why can't you say that everything belongs as a society to someone? And
everything belongs to society?
Everything belongs to a group of people. For example, a family, you can own stuff, and it's not really theft if people utilize it. I'm saying this idea of theft is not necessarily wrong, because the idea of theft would not necessarily exist in a different society.
Okay, so good point. So what are you? So is this what you're saying? Right and wrong are determined by culture, by society.
In a sense, yes.
Okay, then I'm going to give you an illustration. Nuremberg trials, 1945 to 1949. 24 Nazi war criminals are defended by Nazi lawyers. The Nazi lawyers inform the judges at the Nuremberg trial, you have no right to condemn these Nazi war criminals because they simply were carrying out orders. They simply were doing what their culture taught them to do. The trial shut down because those brilliant Nazi lawyers were onto something. If it's true that culture defines right and wrong, there is no way for the Allies to judge the Nazi war criminals because it was their culture who taught them that the Holocaust was good, and they were just following orders. Robert Jackson, the counsel for the American contingent, stood up and said, there is a law above the law. And because of the law above the law, we can judge these Nazi war criminals as doing something wrong. And the trial continued, and those 24 Nazi war criminals were judged as having done something wrong.
Right.
Does that make sense to you?
Yeah, that makes sense, except that I disagree that just because someone else culturally believes that what they think is right does not necessarily entitle them to do whatever it is they want, in the sense that, for example, I have my beliefs, and as a society, the United States has a set of beliefs, and if they're not willing to carry out these beliefs because other culture, for example, the Nazis killing the Jews, is still deemed wrong in our culture, and as such we punish them based on what our beliefs are of right and wrong, not what their beliefs are, because if we always assume that what they think is right, then we won't be able to get anywhere. But as a society, we agreed that killing the Jews is wrong, and as such we punish them.
But Robert Jackson's whole argument was there is a law above a nation's law, there is a law above a cultural law, and that law obviously rests in the existence of God. Because the only way there can be a law above a cultural law is if there is some type of mind prior to the human mind that creates and defines right and wrong.
And I'm saying that that natural above law is unnecessary. And I don't see why it's necessary to judge these people. They, in your belief, okay, the people who are punishing are the ones who have been put into authority by society, and society as a whole decided that that is wrong. And as such, we decided to judge them based on what we decided is right or wrong. And how does that necessitate a higher law?
My experience is that people can follow their conscience instead of following their culture. And we have the utmost respect for people who follow their conscience, which ties them into a law above the law, and they critique their culture. And we have the utmost respect for those people, don't we?
Our laws and or even though I guess you can say culture, but our Constitution, for example, was an intellectual effort, not some kind of just saying, I'm going to appeal to this natural law concept. It's intellectual effort to say, this is what I believe, using my own conscience, is right, and I'm going to write it down on paper and make it the supreme law of the land. And that is what we decide to follow, consciously, not based on culture.
You don't think the U.S. Constitution was based on natural law and divine law?
That's what they claim, technically, but does it not mean there's not a conscious effort?
Oh, there's definitely a conscious effort. Absolutely.
So what was your response to the reason for not your argument for the natural law existing? I said that it doesn't need to be there, and you seem to be thinking that it does.
I think every one of us here understands from the illustration that I gave from Nuremberg that indeed there is a law above the cultural law. If my culture says that black people are 3/5 the value of white people, I can follow my conscience and I can follow my reason and figure out that no, that's an unjust law. That was Dr. Martin Luther King's argument in his letter from a Birmingham jail in Alabama. He wrote to the white Christian ministers in Birmingham, Alabama, and he said, guess what, fellas? The law of the land that you are commanding me to follow, that black boys sit at the back of the bus, that black folk have to drink from different water fountains, well, guess what? The law of God is above the law of the land, the law of this culture. And you guys as Christian ministers, even though you're white, should realize that those laws are racist and they're wrong. So from his prison cell in Birmingham, Alabama, Dr. Martin Luther King was appealing to a law above the law of the culture, the law of the land. And I think that makes a ton of sense if all of us here are willing to think about it. Guess what, guys? The only way there can be a law above the cultural law is if there is some type of God who creates and defines that value of justice that that law expresses.
So what you're saying is that by using my conscience, I'm somehow going to arrive at this natural law?
Correct.
And how is that different from saying that is simply my reason dictating what I decided to be just and not necessarily written by God?
Well, you can do that, but I don't think you can live it out. Because if you're going to live out what you say you believe, you're going to have to acknowledge that if I steal his backpack or if I make a racial slur against you, that's not wrong in any absolute sense. Maybe it's wrong from your perspective, but obviously from my perspective it's right. So your moral relativism crosses you out of the picture when it comes to making an objective moral decision, because everything's relative.
I would agree that what you did is wrong, and I would agree that from your perspective what you did might be entirely right, but that's not going to stop me from punishing you because that is what I believe is right and I'm going to fight for my beliefs.
But if it's relative, why are you going to fight for your beliefs?
Because that is what my belief is.
Yeah, but it's relative. It's not real.
Okay, relativity.
Why would you fight for something that's not real?
Why would you claim that just because it's relative it's not real?
Because that's the definition. The definition of relative is it's not real, it's simply a personal prejudice,
Not
ethic.
True. Relativity means that what can be true for me can be equally true for you.
It's not true.
Yes, it
is not true.
Have you taken a modern physics class recently, by the way? Just wondering.
You cannot say that it's not true if you believe that it's relative. In the area of ethics and morals, if you're going to say it's relative, then you can't say it's really true or really false. You have to say, from my perspective, it's true or false, but my perspective is just my own personal prejudice and bias, my own cultural prejudice. You cannot say, if you're a relativist, it's really evil that a young child be abused. You can't say that.
I'm saying
And
that
be consistent.
that's not entirely true. I have formulated, using my own thoughts, a belief system that I believe will lead to justice and whatnot, and I will follow said belief regardless of what your perspective is.
Yeah. And your perspective, if you believe what you say is, it's all relative. Justice is totally relative. Well, if justice is totally relative, why on earth are you going to enforce your definition of justice upon other people who disagree with you?
Because from my perspective, you are unjust.
Yeah, but if you believe that's relative, that justice is relative, where do you get off being so arrogant as to enforce your definition of justice on me?
Because I am confident in my belief that what I believe is to be the correct belief.
You're a confident, arrogant twit then.
Yes, I am arrogant. Everything you do is based on arrogance. If you
No, it
think
is
you can
not.
do anything.
Absolutely not.
All right.
If you are convinced that God created this man with dignity and value, then
sorry,
you
but
have a
what
basis
is-
for understanding that to murder him, to steal from him, is absolutely wrong. It has nothing to do with me. It has nothing to do with my opinion. It has nothing to do with my culture or my cultural superiority. Nothing, nothing, nothing. It is totally wrapped up in the fact that he has innate value, he has innate dignity, and therefore I am responsible to respect him, not to denigrate him.
Go ahead and define dignity for me.
If you're a relativist, why are you wasting your time talking to me?
And if by reason, I can argue and convince the other person to share my perspective.
Fine. But if they don't choose to share your perspective, they're not wrong, you're not right, because it's all relative.
They think they're not wrong. I think they're wrong.
Yeah, but you are enlightened enough to acknowledge that everything is relative. So because you're so intelligent that you realize that everything is relative, you understand that ultimately nobody's right and nobody's wrong, it's all relative.
Which is also why nobody's going to go to hell or heaven because of what they do, but as long as I'm alive, I'm going to live the way I deem right.
Okay, good.
Misleading. They don't seem to really prove anything, and that would, again, that raised the issue. I've been, someone gave me some advice once. There's actually a proverb that says, if you meet the Buddha along the road, kill him. And I mean, to me, that seems to what you're doing here, selling hope. And so, I mean, I think that it is our duty to, question all those supposed proofs and everything. The guy who's trying to sell you the path to enlightenment and truth is the guy you should be most wary of.
I wasn't under the impression that I'm selling anything.
Well, the books, I mean...
The books? What about the books?
I thought they were selling books back there.
Are you guys selling books back there? The book's for free.
Oh, okay.
So if you'd like one, go right ahead and take
I
one.
stand corrected.
Why did you jump to that conclusion?
Because I've seen, this is the first instance I've been up here, this is my first year up here, first instance I've seen people espouse, promulgating, God and all that, and in Houston, every time I'd see it, they were doing what the girl was actually just talking about here, saying everyone's going to hell, and maybe it was a personal vendetta against people trying to posit their own ideas, and sometimes I see people that are very clever at doing that, and I just want to be able to try to give them a good debate.
Thanks for your honesty.
Because you always ask every time someone gets off right before they leave what they live for and their view, and I believe the whole purpose is an individual existence. You can't look at it without the context of society. We've always had society, and the whole process, the whole existence, like what our purpose here is what we're doing right now, the collective deliberation, putting forth you take your experience, what you learn from life, and you have to bring that to the table. And when people just stand by and let people control the whole situation, that's a lack of living up to your purpose in life.
Which is?
Taking whatever it is you believe, whatever it is you have learned from experience, and coming up and bringing that to the table of society and getting it out there in collective deliberation. Ben Franklin sets up this whole thing beautifully in his autobiography. That's what the whole idea of community is about, is, the self. In the whole thing, he talks about the self, but he never talks about a private self, is because the self that matters is the communal self, what we give to each other and what we can take from each other so we can, better our way of life, how we live, and come to know whatever you may call it, come to communion with God, or an actualization of self, or however Thoreau talks about going out and being aware of the this in tune acuteness to the life and all these different processes and different beliefs, and you have to be able to give everybody an equal share, I guess, and it's living up to your own responsibility, coming up here and putting your own ideas forward and letting them, debate and dance with everybody else's.
Have you found a better way to promote life than what Jesus Christ taught and modeled?
Well, no, but Jesus Christ's way is one of many, and I mean, it's not necessarily that one is better, objectively. One is only better subjectively in person. Jesus Christ's teachings are better for you, but to a person from a different culture, it may be something completely different. When Emerson talks about the tradition, he frowns upon tradition, saying that we're the present generation being thrown out into masquerade in the clothes of their forefathers is, a wrong view. This tradition is given to us from our, fathers and their fathers before them. It's not, your grandfather's old coat that you're going out masquerade in this negative, imagery that Emerson uses. It's, your father's old jacket that's given down from your grandfather. It's a piece of your own personal history. That's why Christianity works for people who'd had Christianity in their past, whereas Buddhism would maybe work for someone who has more tendencies towards that. It's not that one is above the other. We all see it from different lenses, and whichever one's, coalesces with our experiences and our tradition is the best one.
Whatever coalesces with your tradition?
Yeah, so let's say
one?
Christianity may work better for certain experiences than Islam. Some people might have grown up under a certain, I don't know the exact experiences, but a person might be, Islam could be more right for one person and help them to reach God than Christianity. But I'm not saying there's a different God, that one is right and one is wrong. They're different paths to the same thing. William Blake says this in his, he has two essays, All Religions Are One, and I forget the name of the other, but it's the same idea. It's different paths to the same mountaintop.
So the atheist and I are going to the same top of the same mountain?
Yeah. If that atheist can realize his responsibility to the humans around him, to life around him, and can work for the betterment of each other, it matters not whether he, praises this name of God or that or the absence of one. As long as he can, effectively relate with other people and help, and we can all better our plot here in the world, then
What
he's
does that mean,
fulfilled.
to better our plot in the world? Who defines what's better?
You do. That's the whole issue of Thoreau, is your idea of the world comes from, you look at yourself and you imagine through an active imagination, you envision the world in which you will flourish, and you work to achieve that end. And that is a responsibility to yourself, to God. That is what you can call the actualization of self, or communion with God, whatever you want, but it's still, same thing.
And what happens if I think that self-actualization is best achieved by having sex with as many good-looking women as I can, by making as much money as I can, by driving as nice a car as I can, and by having as many homes as I can?
Well, I would say if that's what it tells you, then you fulfill that. But common experience tells us, or at least from my viewpoints, to my viewpoints, what I've seen
Your
is
viewpoint.
that doesn't make me happy. I mean,
it makes a lot of others of us very happy.
Oh, and immediately, yes. But after long term, that's the whole thing about, hedonism. People always try to condemn hedonism, but I see a really close affinity between hedonism and Epicureanism. But the thing is, if you take it in the temporal context, you're not going to go off and rape women because you like sex, because there's repercussions. You have to take responsibility for your action. Just because something is pleasurable
What do you mean you have to take responsibility for your action? What does that mean? Why? Why do you have to take responsibility? Why can't you just treat life, if everything's totally relative, and if it's just a matter of you creating reality in your own head, why do you have to take responsibility for what you do? You're an accident.
No. All right,
you're not an accident?
Well, all right. First of all, I never said anything about being an accident, but I kind of like the idea of us being an accident. Kierkegaard says that God never consulted me before he threw me into this thing called existence. It pretty much is kind of an accident. I'm thrown into it, but I still am confronted with a life that I must deal with, and it is my responsibility to try to make sense of it. And that's the whole idea of community.
So make sense of it. And does it make sense that if I want to go and have sex with as many people as I can, and make as much money as I can, and drive as many expensive cars as I can, you have a problem with that? If that's my reality that I choose to create as the purpose of my life, you have a problem with that?
But the thing is, I know where you're trying to lead with that, but that doesn't.
Oh, no. Just answer me, man. Come on, speak to me. Don't give me this garbage about you know where I'm going.
One more time?
Just talk to me, man.
There's a difference between just whimsical notions of happiness and your own true will.
Oh, really? What's the difference? And where do you get off telling me that if I want to have sex with as many good-looking women as I can, and I want to drive as many expensive cars as I can, that I'm not being sincere to myself? Where do you get off making that kind of judgment call?
Because I've gone down that path, and I thought the same damn thing, but that doesn't make you truly happy.
Well, how do you know what's going to make me truly happy?
I'm not, but I can say you can go ahead and try, but I know that's not going to do it.
Oh, you do? Well, you are one knowledgeable gentleman. My goodness.
Because I live with a whole bunch of people who think the same thing, and I keep saying the same thing.
So you've got a bunch of people agreeing with you. Bravo. Does that mean it's true?
No. Agreeing with what you're saying, that they still think that the road to happiness is going out there and a bunch of women and doing drugs and buying big fancy cars, and they keep ending up unhappy, pissed off about something else or other. So you can say that's what you really want in life, but no, that's not what you really want in life.
Oh, what do I really want in life?
I don't know, but just...
Well, then what do you mean you know that it's not what I really want then?
Because everybody is just going to say, well, pleasure makes me happy, so anything that gives... That's the simple argument. You're trying to take the simple argument. There is a pleasure beyond just the immediate, oh, right now I'm going to this girl and I'm going to be happy forever because I had a pleasurable experience. Even though there are other emotions that may be involved, you might get hurt about something. But you're saying, no, sex makes me happy, so I can go all these women, and that's... No, that's...
According to your worldview, you have no basis to tell me that if I think gassing Jews is the right way for me to experience happiness and to help my culture, my country get better, you have no basis that I've heard yet of telling me, no, that's wrong, and that's not right.
The basis I'm using is the whole fact of what I've been arguing is this collective deliberation is a history of things. We have been taught by history that those are wrong things. You keep using examples, gassing Jews. We know through history, we all saw the acts of Hitler. Everybody agrees that that is not a good thing.
You gotta be kidding me. You honestly think everybody agrees that racism and Aryan supremacy is wrong? You honestly believe that?
Okay, no.
Good. Thank you. Have a good afternoon, man.
I just wanted to get your perspective really on maybe the role of shame in the Christian church and if it's used in ways that are maybe counterproductive to what Jesus was actually saying. Sin being just this name for something that we constantly want to rid ourselves of because we want to live and not die kind of thing. I just wanted to get your opinion on just the concept of sin and how it's used in the Christian church, and how it sent someone like me away from the church. And I think it's kind of an issue for me, you know, especially when you hear those guys on the, you know, with the big megaphones telling people and shaming people, saying, you're going to hell, you're going to hell, you're going to hell. What do you think about all of that?
If I could murder this woman, bathe my hands in her blood, and feel no guilt, I think that would be really sad, tragic, wrong. So I, for one, am very grateful that God has given us consciences, or just that we have consciences, and we've got out of it at this point, that we have consciences that inform us that murdering people and bathing our hands in their blood is really wrong. I would hate to live in a society where people didn't have a conscience.
Absolutely.
Get me out of that, right?
That makes a lot of sense. And I think that, yeah, those things, guilt, shame, conscience, all of that has a place in life. But do you think that in some modern churches, and kind of the mainstream cultural Jesus-type churches, that it's blown out of proportion, that people maybe, you know, like, I found that the church really isn't a place that people can take their biggest and darkest problems anymore. If there was someone that showed up to church and said something along the lines of, you know, like that man, the pornography addict, who couldn't really come to his church and say, I struggle with porn, and I watch it all the time, and it's making me crazy, and I don't know how to stop. And that was something that just became this internal struggle, because he was in so much shame about it and didn't really think that the church would understand, you know? And I think that's just kind of sad to me.
Well, the reason I appreciate what you're saying is because I am a minister of a church, one of the pastors of the church in Connecticut. And one of the ways I define the church is Christ's hospital, where broken people like me come for healing. Eugene O'Neill wrote, we're all born broken. Life is about healing. The grace of God is the glue. That's what I need, because I'm born broken. I have a problem with wrongdoing. I do not follow the golden rule perfectly. At times I do follow it, and other times I don't follow it. And I am convinced that it would be wise for me to try and follow it better. And if there is a God in heaven who wants to help me, it would be very wise for me to ask for his help. Now, what Jesus Christ revealed is that there is a God who wants to help me in my brokenness, to give me grace, his love, his power, his guidance, his strength, his wisdom, to grow and to change. So the church is Christ's hospital, where broken people like me come to Christ for healing. Now, as a follower of Christ, do I experience guilt still? Absolutely yes. And I'm glad I do, because I still mishandle people, am rude to people at times, and that's wrong of me. And I experience guilt, but what do I do with that guilt? I don't rationalize it away, and I don't allow it to just pound me into the ground. Oh, you're a loser, you're a loser, you're a loser. Instead, I turn to Jesus Christ, and he promises to forgive me. And so I accept that promise, rejoice in that forgiveness, and then by his grace, with his help, seek to change and become more Christ-like. Obviously, that's going to be a lifelong process for me, because I got plenty of bad habits that are deeply ingrained. See, I'm not like this guy. I am not a guy who just always follows the golden rule. I'm a guy who struggles with superiority feelings at times. I struggle, you know what I really struggle with? I really struggle with feeling really stung by certain people when they make certain comments to me. And the fact that I feel so deeply stung by their comments shows that there's way too much of my ego hanging around. And that far too much of my self-image is based on what other people think of me. And what Christ calls me to is to base my self-image and my worth on his love for me and the fact that he created me for a purpose, not whether people think I'm great or think I'm a loser. So there are so many examples of how I stray from Christ and stray from what is good. And what sin is it's very destructive. And I've watched that destructiveness take place in my own life, and I've watched it take place in the lives of my family, those who I love most. And so I hate sin. But I'm so grateful that God is gracious and forgives and is in the business of healing broken lives like mine.
Yeah, I really appreciate you saying that, because I think that sometimes the role of the church is misinterpreted as this collective group that just keeps eyes on everybody else, which, you know, I think it turns into this legalistic, who can be the best Christian game show type of thing.
Right.
And I definitely got caught up in that. When I was in the Christian church, I was very legalistic, and because I was, you know, didn't do anything wrong ever. But I think that Christian churches sometimes just maybe don't get it, that this is a lifelong process, that there's so much emphasis on the conversion experience as being this end-all be-all, now I'm clean kind of thing, and that you'll never struggle again. And I found that way of thinking just doesn't work. You know, that it's you know, even for me as a non-Christian, you know, I would consider myself an agnostic, you know, but I do have to constantly reach out to something bigger than myself, because I'm stuck. You know, you can't physically move yourself from somewhere. Like, you know, there's just these behaviors that I keep doing, you know, like procrastination for one. I can't stop for the life of me procrastinating. And whatever you want to call that, sin, you know, being lazy, whatever, I had to reach out for that and say, I can't move myself from this position. But I wasn't able to quite get there when I was in the Christian church, because I was stuck. And, you know, I think of it in terms of awareness, acceptance, and action. You know, you're aware that something's wrong, maybe you accept it, but, you know, that can also be interpreted as you and God accepting it. But I try to jump from awareness to action and say, God, I'm such a bad person, let me change it. You know, and missing that middle part, you know, of grace, I guess, is what I would call it. But I feel like I'm not making a whole lot of sense, and I have to go to class. But
I think you made a lot of sense, so thank you so much for stopping by.
Yeah, of course. Thank you for being here.
You bet. Have a good afternoon.